Welcome to this new edition of Hoist the Colors. I'm Tim Best, Patrick Madden, my co-host, and we got a great guest as this is Feast Week. It's really kicking off with a lot of great Feast Week tournaments, MTs happening around the country, one of which is in sunny San Diego, Thanksgiving Day and Black Friday, which, as you all know, your Seton Hall Pirates will be playing in. And joining us to talk about this outstanding event. I believe it's the inaugural event in this event's history. He is one half of arguably the best radio duo in the Big East Conference, along with Gary Cohen, the one and only Dave Popkin. Dave, both of us, and I'm speaking for Pat too, we're so glad to have you on this edition of this, again, this new Seton Hall podcast.
No problem. Always like talking to you guys. Thanks.
All right, well, let's start with Seton Hall's off to a 4-0 start. 4-game homestand, had its ups and downs, if you will, but after a shaky start against St. Peter's, they played really strong ball ever since then. So from the first couple weeks and this 4-0 start, what are your positive and negative takeaways so far from this team?
Well, after seeing the team at NJIT in the exhibition, which was underwhelming, and then the first game, the first half of which was underwhelming, they've looked great since then. I think they've looked like one of the better teams in the league. Granted, they're playing mid-majors. This week is going to be a step up in class, but you talk about the veterans leading the way, Adewusu and Richmond and Dawes and Dre Davis. Those guys have been very solid. I think Adewusu has been as expected or better. He seems like he's in good shape. He's hitting the deck for balls. He's a willing passer. He can rebound. Obviously a strong guy. So that's been a good addition because they lost some toughness off last year's team. They lose Femi Odekale. They lose Casey Nadefo. Doesn't get much tougher than those guys in terms of box outs and 50-50 balls and just general toughness in the lane. So yeah, I think Adewusu can provide that. And Bediako, as the fifth starter, has been very good. After getting his feet wet that first game, he's been solid. He's been a double-double generally and in limited minutes. It seems like he has pretty good hands. It seems like he can run the floor. Not super athletic. I mean, he played 4 years at Santa Clara, which is a good program, and I think he's been efficient, and we'll see, how he fares against some of these monsters in the Big East and the non-conference schedule. But those five starters are solid, and then the bench, I think a couple of those guys are ahead of schedule. Isaiah Coleman in particular.
Yeah, Isaiah Coleman, I guess you saw that he was Big East Freshman of the Week. I think there's a lot of, I don't want to put him in the same category because obviously Miles Powell is an icon, but I think there's a lot of Miles Powell in Isaiah Coleman's game. Aggressive offensively, great range on the jump shot, knows how to find his way in the lane. So what are your thoughts about Coleman and what his potential might be, not even including this season, but going forward?
I hope they can keep him moving forward because I think that that's not a horrible, comparison. I think that, freshman year, he's probably better than Miles Powell so far. But Powell became an All-American and obviously, an all-time favorite at Seton Hall. Coleman is more athletic. He's bigger. He can get to the rim. He's a true combo guard. I like him a lot. I mean, they don't seem to have to call plays for him to go get 10 within the flow of play. Good rebounder, 6'5". I think he'll fill out more. He's only 180 pounds right now. After you see it after a year or two with Jason Naring and the training staff, these guys become Big East players, right? They bulk up a little bit in terms of muscle and their overall conditioning. So the sky's the limit for him. I mean, he can leap. It seems like he has a decent outside shot. We haven't seen him really make threes yet, but he seems to have a stroke from out there. So I'm looking forward to seeing him progress. And hopefully Seton Hall can hang on to him for a few years and he can become part of the foundation.
I couldn't agree more on that. And that was kind of a big gripe about last year's team. Grant, with all the experience you had, it's kind of hard for a guy like Quan Sanders, for example, as a freshman to steal a lot of minutes. But, moving forward and in this kind of game, it's kind of with NIL and everything, it's hard to retain guys and especially freshmen, like giving them minutes, keeping them happy. So if he keeps performing like this, Shao's got to keep him in the lineup, and that'll keep him happy and keep him in South Orange in turn. But I mean, let's talk about what's happening in San Diego, as Ron Burgundy has poignantly put it.
Stay classy.
Stay classy indeed. Founded by the Germans in 1904. But Isaiah, speaking of, he's got to have that, he's got to grow up essentially after these first 4 games. Now you got to play, no matter what, you're going to face 2 Power 5 teams, Power 6. I'm sorry, Big East is a power conference. I don't want to hear it anyways. But you get a top 25 USC team coming off a bit of a disappointing loss at home earlier, just last week. Essentially some vulnerability that you see from the Trojans. But now the question becomes, you obviously got to have Isaiah Coleman grow up, but you have the rest of the team. They got to step up too if they want to get a good quality top 25 win to at least, solidify that Thursday, Friday as a quality road trip.
Yeah, you'd like to get a split out there, however you get it. I think you have to throw out the USC loss to UC Irvine because they didn't have their starting backcourt. Boogie Ellis and Kobe Johnson are terrific, 4 or 5-star caliber guys. They'll probably both play in the NBA. So if they're not out there, they're probably not going to win. They're not that good that they can weather that and beat anybody decent. And UC Irvine is pretty decent. The anteaters, if you will. So I saw their game last night against Brown. They were life and death against Brown. I mean, the scoreboard says they won by 11, but the officiating was shaky down the stretch. They made a couple of key mistakes that would have made it a much closer game, and Brown was single digits, pretty much the whole second half against USC. So the point is they're beatable. Brown is, I don't know, 3rd, 4th, 5th best team in the Ivy League. They're pretty good. They're very good, but it would have been a shocking upset for them to go to USC and win the game. And that's with Johnson back, that's with Boogie Ellis back, and with them having big games. Their bench didn't have a big game. They still don't have Bronny James. They won't for several weeks at least. So they are a work in progress. I think, Seton Hall might be getting them at a good time. I think the differentiator in the game is toughness. Like if Seton Hall can really get Big East tough, quote unquote, and box them out and hit the deck and share the ball and play Seton Hall basketball, then they have a chance in this game because they have older guys. Like Seton Hall has guys that have been through it before. They're not afraid to play on the road. And it's basically a road game, right? It'll be a lot of USC people there in San Diego. So I'm really looking forward to that game. USC does have top 20 caliber players on their roster. Can they meld together quickly enough to beat a pretty good Seton Hall team? I think it's going to be a close game.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on something, Dave. Andy Enfield's been at USC now. What's he in his 8th or 9th season?
10 years.
10 years. Okay, wow. even better. Yeah, that Dunk City's. That's the weird thing. Everyone remembers, and everyone remember Dunk City when they just blew everyone's minds, beating a very good Georgetown team in a 15-2 upset back in 2013. And then Enfield gets the job at USC. And he's had talented teams at USC the bulk of his run. And then they get bad losses that you really can't explain. And why are USC teams that look like they're top 10 teams not really doing much in the NCAA tournament? So you probably hit upon it a little bit in your last answer, but are there just nights where USC just takes the game off? And that's when a team like Seton Hall, not as talented, might find a way to sneak an upset out?
They play like an NBA team. They shoot a lot of threes. There's a lot of one-on-one ball. They're not particularly tough on defense, but they could be on a given night. I mean, they certainly have the talent. I mean, they have 4 and 5 star players on the roster, right? This is going to be a good team this year. It could be a Sweet 16 team this year. So it's a great opportunity for Seton Hall. I like their team a lot. I mean, Ellis went and got 28 last night, and he wasn't really forcing it. I mean, I felt like he took pretty good shots. They have a great length. They have McDonald's All-Americans. Like, if they could just play together and play tough, they're going to win a couple games in the NCAA tournament this year. Last year, they got a tough draw. They got Michigan State. Tom Izzo always wins in March. So that one can be forgiven. He did take them to the Elite Eight a few years ago. That was the one big run. I think that was about 3 years ago. So I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting game. I'm really looking forward to it. Seton Hall needs to make threes because USC is going to take and make a bunch of threes. And you just do the basic math. It's like Rick Pitino math. As soon as they instituted a 3-point shot, he's like, threes are more than twos, right? We're going to take a lot of threes. And the Pirates did not take a lot of threes their last game. They were dominating inside their last few games. I don't know that they'll be able to dominate inside against one of the biggest teams in the country.
There might be a parallel then to the Albany game on Wednesday night, because Albany tried to establish the three and managed to hit a few early, and that's why the defense didn't look quite as good in the game Wednesday night than they had, let's say, Saturday against Wagner, and then the Saturday before against FDU. So I think that's, Albany's certainly not on a level as a USC, but I think there's lessons to be learned from the way Albany came out on Wednesday night, tried to establish the outside shot and wanted to just score as much as possible, and dare Seton Hall to put points on the board to match them.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, Seton Hall hasn't guarded the three quite as well as they did last year. They've been improving in that regard, but some of these teams are getting some open looks against them, and USC is a team that you can't do that against. Even some of the guys they bring off the bench, like the big guy Harrison Hornery, he hit 4 threes 2 games ago. Didn't do anything the last game, but they have a good handful of players, that can make threes and deep threes. So I think that's a challenge, just guarding the three and then hitting some yourself. This is a game where Al Dawes needs to have a big game. Yep. Right? He's got to go for 20 plus, make some threes, stretch the floor. And Kadari Richmond, right? He's going to be going up against guards that are as good or better than him now. He's kind of cruised through the first 4 games very impressively, in control, but now he's coming up against elite talent. So I think Richmond has played as well as anybody that I've seen this year in the country. But now he'll get a chance to prove it. In the next game, good teams also. I think maybe Iowa a little better than Oklahoma. I haven't seen them a ton, but both, are comparable, and they're winnable games, but not easy. They're 2 teams that handled Seton Hall last year.
And that Iowa team specifically, I mean, they kind of got some points late when the game's kind of in the balance, but they lost by only single digits to Creighton in Omaha last week. So maybe that's a sign this Fran McCaffrey team might be better than people think. And obviously, yeah. So, I mean, now the question becomes, you brought up a great point about Al Dawes. My big thing with him is, when he gets hot, it's hard to find a hotter shooter on this team or on anyone in the Big East, to be honest with you. But his streakiness, he's got to just, in that kind of game, you want to get an upset, you got to find a way for him to get consistent. You can't have him make 4 in a row and then miss 8 in a row,
Yeah, and it's going to be hard for him because people are really going to have to set screens and get him catch and shoot threes where he's not on the move. I mean, he can make them on the move if he's already made 2 or 3 in a row and he's just feeling it, because then he can make any shot. Right. But to get it going, get a layup, get a couple free throws, see the ball go through the rim, then maybe, make an easy 3, and then you can get rolling a little bit. I mean, he's played well. I mean, he's averaged 14 points a game so far. Has only shot, about 33% from downtown. So Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. He's going to be guarded by taller players. That could be an issue. Like if they put Johnson on him, Kobe Johnson's like 6'6", and he's a combo guard. Like he can handle the ball. He's going to be guarding guards on the perimeter. And even Ellis is a little taller than Aldaz. So it could be an issue. But, then you need some other guys to step up. Like you talked about Jaquan Sanders, which is how he wants to pronounce his name now. We just found this out the last game. We're already in the second season, but he came up and said he wants Jaquan, so we're going to go with that. But he needs to hit some threes, and Richmond maybe a couple threes. And Dre Davis, who threw up some air balls in the last game, if he could hit a couple threes, then all of a sudden, you don't need 15 points from Bediako. Like you would like to get a solid game from him, but they're going to throw like 4 players that are 6'10 plus against him on the front line. And I don't know that Hutchins Everett is going to be ready to come back yet from the concussion. So a lot of it is going to be on Bediako up front in terms of size.
Right. I looked at the Oklahoma roster just quickly. I know we briefly touched upon the Iowa. Oklahoma's off to a good start against nobody. Unfortunately, there's 2 levels of nightmares with that Oklahoma team. First of all, obviously that they're the team that Seton Hall lost to in that semifinal down in Florida. And then one of their leading players is Javion McCallum, a transfer from Siena, who did some damage against Seton Hall in the 3rd game of the Florida tournament. So what's your I mean, I don't know how much of Oklahoma any of us have seen, but obviously Porter Mosers was one of the most underrated coaches in the country before he took the Oklahoma job. He hasn't really made his mark yet, partially because Oklahoma's in maybe arguably the toughest or second toughest conference in the country in the Big 12. But what's your take on what you've scouted regarding Oklahoma, if you've done a lot of scouting on the Sooners so far?
Yeah, I've only seen the one so far, so I'm looking forward to digging into that a little bit more over the next few days. But they have a lot of transfers on the roster. He never really did that before at Loyola or early on at Oklahoma. He tried to build from within with some younger guys, but he was forced to plug some gaps this year and join the portal like everybody else. Porter in the portal. So yeah, I mean, McCallum is a very good player. He hurt Seton Hall last year in that game. He was the best player on the floor in that game. So to add him to the Sooner roster definitely helps them. I don't think they're quite as good as last year, at least not yet, from the one game that I saw. But you never know. These teams are figuring it out. Like a team like that has a bunch of transfers a couple weeks from now might be pretty tough. I mean, basketball takes a while. That's why Princeton is one of my favorite teams that I've seen this year, because they're so connected, right? These guys have played together and it's a consistent lineup and they pass it. And they're, I mean, always with the back doors and 3-point shooting and the free throw shooting and all of the tenets of Princeton basketball, but you can tell that they are connected and they're on the same page. And they went down couple days ago and blitzed a Monmouth team that's pretty good. Like I saw Monmouth a couple times this year. They went down to 1 at West Virginia impressively. Okay. Xander Rice had 30 in that game. They controlled Rice for the most part. I think he had like 14 points or something in the Princeton game. But that's the kind of team that can go far, as they did last year, right? They go to the Sweet 16. They don't have McDonald's All-Americans on that team, but that is how some teams are going to survive. They don't even have scholarships, let alone NIL, right? But that's how some of these teams can still survive. If you can keep guys 3-4 years and have some continuity, you're going to have some of these teams like FAU make the Elite Eight, make the Final Four, even though they're not the, quote unquote, big NIL schools.
So one more guy in Oklahoma before I get off of that point is John Ugley, who's a transfer from Pitt. I'm sure you've seen Ugley a bunch of times, Dave. I just remember a game he played 2 years ago at Madison Square Garden where he dominated a St. John's game. Now, St. John's didn't have Julian Champagny, who's an NBA player, for that game, but St. John's had no answers for John Ugley, the fourth, that night. And Ugley's the type of guy who unfortunately precisely fits what might be one of the weaker links on the Seton Hall team. So should we be worried about a player like Ugley potentially, if Seton Hall does play Oklahoma, be it for the championship or be it in the losers bracket on Friday, is Ugley a guy who Seton Hall fans should be worried about in the second game of the San Diego tournament?
Yeah, maybe. Yes. And it depends like who's available for Seton Hall in this game. Can Hutchins Everett come back? Is David Tubeck going to be available? And if he is, what is he going to bring in his first couple games as he comes off of a back injury? So, can you have Dre Davis guard him? Dre Davis came in with a defensive rep, not an offensive rep. And so he can play defense. And he got gritty in that last game. Like he was going up and snaring rebounds and boxing people out and, scored 17 points in a pretty limited amount of minutes. So I think Seton Hall can beat most teams. I hate to say that about a team that was picked 9th in the league, but, are Marquette and Creighton and UConn a step above the other Big East teams? I think that they are. But once you get beyond that, Xavier has shown some good things recently. But once you get beyond that, take your pick, man. At Providence, St. John's, Seton Hall, any of those teams in the middle of the pack can beat any of the others, I think, this year. You get to the bottom, maybe some separation, right? At least right now with DePaul and Georgetown and maybe Butler too. But I think Seton Hall is going to be very competitive in the league this year.
So, and that, by the way, I'm glad you said that because that perfectly segues into what I was going to ask you next. With so many of these teams competing in Feast Week tournaments, I know Providence already did their thing in Baja Mar, St. John's down in Charleston, DePaul in Arizona, but the top dogs like UConn currently they're in the Empire Classic, Marquette's in Maui in the most stacked field I've seen in a long time, and obviously Seton Hall's in San Diego, and I think Butler's in Orlando. I can't remember where Villanova was, but given how we've seen,
they're going to Atlantis.
Thank you. But seeing certain things develop, like seeing Villanova go down to Penn, Xavier having lost a couple of games, including to Washington. Do you think this could be the time where Seton Hall can make a statement and say we're a lot better than preseason 9th in the conference, and B, we can get in that conversation of being top 5 in the league and being right up there as an NCAA tournament team and maybe even getting safely in the field come March?
I think it's possible. Before the year, I thought they would have a similar record and be on the bubble again, maybe in the NIT. But now, ask me a week from now.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Because it's really hard to say. It's hard to say. Like FDU and St. Peter's are good mid-majors right now, right? And these are teams that could end up in the top couple of their league, okay? Beyond that, like you just don't know. You don't know until they play, a couple good teams and give Shaheen Holloway some time with some of these guys. Like, could Malachi Brown be a guy that is not only your backup point guard, but could go from playing 5 or 10 minutes a game to like 15 or 20 minutes a game and give a breather to all 3 of your main guards. He seems pretty steady, not a big kid, but he seems like he can handle it, right? And if Shaheen Holloway picks you to be his point guard, he must know something, right? He plucks the kid out of Buford, Georgia. It wasn't that highly recruited, but he's looked good. He's looked pretty solid, and it looks like he can shoot a little bit too. So, how fast are these freshmen, and Nganga? Like, how fast is Nganga going to develop? He hasn't played much basketball in his life. Depending upon who you ask, he was a 4 or 5-star player like 2 or 3 years ago. Okay. And you can see the physical talent, but he didn't play much at Boise State. He was always hurt. And that was the best thing about these first 4 games, is that instead of being like down to like a 2-possession game where you had to play the starters 38 minutes and whatnot, these guys got to rest. The bench got a chance to play, and we got a chance to see them a little bit. They got to play with each other. Maybe they got to play with, Dawes or Adewusu in that B lineup. And they looked pretty good, and they got, as Patrick was saying before, like, if you want to keep some of these guys, they got to play. They got to play some minutes. So they can't sit there on the bench and play 2 minutes and you just expect that everybody's going to come back. Not in 2024. So I think that the team has room for growth, and I think they're in a pretty good place.
Naganga is interesting to me quickly because in the first half on Saturday, he was trying to shoot 3-pointers. He was trying to play a stretch 4. And I think there are some similarities between how Tyrese Samuel came out last season and how Samuel played most of his career before Shaheen Holloway basically told him, hey, look, you're 6'10". Now, last year was more of a necessity because Seton Hall had no size. So Samuel was the most talented guy on the team above 6'7". So obviously you've got to put him on the blocks to stop some of the big guys. So Saturday, Holloway plays Naganga more on the blocks than letting him roam around and do some of the other things. And Naganga made a few plays. So clearly you can coach him into learning how to play on the blocks. And maybe you put him in a nice little rotation with Everett and Bediako, and you sort of get a 3-headed monster, which you'll need to have someone who's fresh against those Big East centers. And you might still run into a night where, Bediako gets into foul trouble and you need somebody to come in to play the 5. So do you think that's sort of a direction that Holloway can send Naganga in as we go forward this season?
Maybe. He seems like a rangy player that would just like to, at least on offense, play on the wing, and slash and shoot. And it doesn't seem like he's a post-up player yet. He's athletic, and you have to take advantage of that and let him get out on the break and get out in passing lanes and create some deflections. Can he guard some bigger players down the other end? Should be able to. There's not that many dominant low post centers anymore. A lot of these guys that are 6'9", 6'10", 6'11" playing center are also, going to step out and shoot threes and mid-range jump shots. So he gives you some versatility. Holloway seems to like him. He's given him a lot of minutes so far. He's just going to let him learn on the job, basically. He hasn't played that much basketball in recent years. So he's just got to get out there and do it and succeed and fail and see what works. And non-conference is the time to do it. And then maybe after, 10 or 15 games, you can evaluate what you have there a little better. I'm excited to see Tubek when he plays. That guy's on the all-airport team. He seems like a stud muffin. I mean, it's like 6'9", really built. I think that might be a steal. It might take him a while to come back from his injury, but that gives them some needed depth where, if Hutchins Everett is out for any length of time or Bediako's in foul trouble or whatever the situation is, he gives you another option. So instead of like at the end of the last year, they had like 6 or 7 guys they could put in the game and count on. You could have a solid 10-man rotation, on this team.
Which would be huge. Now, before we let you go, Pat and I were talking. We definitely want to give you this opportunity because I know you just started up a new podcast, and on your first episode, you had what has become the official favorite player of Hoist the Colors, Dylan Adewusu. So yeah, I want to give you the opportunity now to plug Crashing the Boards, what the show's about, and where to find it for these Seton Hall fans.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's like a friendly foes show. I'm doing the show with the color commentator for Rutgers, Austin Johnson, who I've gotten friendly with the last year or so. He's a former player there, so it brings that different perspective, and it brings the perspective of 2 guys that are traveling with the 2 main teams in New Jersey, right? So we know these teams well, and we're going to have a wide variety of guests. We've already had Brett McConnell from Princeton, who's a hot assistant coach. We've had John Fanta. This week we had a long interview with King Rice, the Monmouth coach. Andre Hyatt from Rutgers joined us. Adam Zagoria, who you guys know, the beat writer for Seton Hall. We're going to have Tariq Turner coming up. We're going to, get all different kinds of guests, head coaches, assistant coaches, players, media. that kind of thing, past and present, and talk about New Jersey college basketball, like the 8 Division I teams and some women's games as well, and give them some love, and anything that comes up that's related, like, if we can get Sandro Mamukelashvili, who came through Seton Hall and starting to see some minutes with the Spurs. That's the kind of guest that we would like to have. So Crashing the Boards is on every Sunday at 11 a.m. on Fox Sports Radio New Jersey, which is 93.5 FM, 1450 AM. That's WCTC out of New Brunswick and Somerset. And it's also available as a podcast at the Fox Sports Radio New Jersey.com website. So we'll do it every Sunday between, opening week and the Final Four. And, looking forward to having some fun with it, talking Jersey basketball.
Well, I listened to most of your first episode and a part of your second one, and I think you're off to a great start. Your interview of King Rice was very revealing regarding he's playing his son. Xander Rice is probably one of his best players, and he gave a really interesting expose about Xander's path. And hopefully we can do that with some of the players on some of the more elite teams. We can talk about, you already interviewed Dylan Adewusu, but his path is certainly interesting. And maybe even Isaiah Coleman's path. How does a guy get recruited by College of Charleston, who was a top 25 team, and he was supposed to play for a really elite coach, Pat Kelsey? And what happened in Charleston, and how do we get so fortunate to have one of the best freshmen in the Big East and Isaiah Coleman wearing Pirate Blue? So I'll be tuning in for all of the stories that you and Austin can get regarding all of the teams in New Jersey, particularly when you do some deep dives into Seton Hall.
Thanks. Yeah, we'll be delving into all that, and I get to see some of the other teams as well because I do the NEC TV games, so I'll see FDU. I'm doing NJIT tonight against Delaware State, and I'm doing some St. Peter's games this year as well. So I'll get out there and see almost everybody. And as I mentioned, like Monmouth and Princeton, I think they're going to have really good seasons. So yeah, it's a good year. New Jersey could get like 4 teams in the tournament this year. It could be a really Riders picked to win the MAC. St. Peter's is ahead of schedule, so it's a good year to be doing this.
Well, Dave, again, thank you for the time again. Obviously with you being on the call tonight, I enjoy, have a good call there, but I know you got some some Thanksgiving appointment television, or in this case radio. So again, best of luck. Tell Gary we said hello. Safe travels to San Diego, and hopefully by the time you get back, hopefully we'll get at least one, maybe even 2, and make some noise around the rest of the Big East. Dave, appreciate the time again.
You got it. Thanks, guys. Have a good Thanksgiving.
You too.
You too, Dave.
So